All right. Hey, everyone. It's awesome to be back here, this time with 1Password. I recently joined as the VP of Product and AI, and I'm here to talk about 1Password and AI, everyone's favorite subject. So to start off, I want to talk about how we're approaching AI from a principles perspective. Leah talked a little bit about our secrets, differentiation, sort of how we think about that. But actually, there's like a 70-page white paper out there. If you Google 1Password white paper, that actually talks a lot about our principles and our methodologies and things like that, but for user credentials, right? And so we decided we'll give this a bit of an update for AI. And sort of let me talk through that a little bit. So the first one is how we think about AI is from a secret standpoint, is for raw credentials, we want to adhere to the exact same security model that Leah mentioned, which is that we should not be able to decrypt your raw credentials, right? So what that ties back to the two key secret derivation, as well as the zero knowledge architecture, but that's going to remain. The second principle is authorization must be deterministic and not probabilistic. So recently, there's been a standard called the Model Context Protocol, or MCP, in the AI world, which allows LLMs to interact efficiently with tools and resources. And there are some solutions out there that actually release raw credentials over this channel. But the problem with that is that even MCP actually has the authorization channel, which is deterministic. It actually uses OAuth, and a probabilistic channel, which the LLM drives. And so releasing credentials or authorization on the probabilistic channel doesn't seem like a very good practice, right? And something that the LLM can see. And so our approach is no, not for raw credentials, but we do support MCP for other use cases. The third point actually ties back to the second point, which is that you shouldn't be putting raw credentials into the context window of an LLM, right? And and for instance, using releasing raw credentials over MCP as an example is the equivalent of typing in the prompt window, "Hey, here's my password for this service. Please use it on my behalf. Enter." Or "Here's my API key." It's not a great thing because obviously it increases the chance of leakage, right, of those credentials. And so just from a principle and a best practice, that's we don't approve. The fourth is auditability. So obviously there's auditability even when users go and access different applications and tools. But the bar is much, much higher for agentic AI, right? So we need to know where those credentials were used, why they were used, by whom, and all of those things. The fifth principle is be transparent, right? So in the product, as we sort of incorporate AI, right, to sort of enhance the product and delight customers, we want to be transparent on exactly how that's used, what data is getting sent, right, what this LLM is doing, right? We don't want sort of kind of like opaque, powered by AI, where you don't actually know what's happening. So we want to be transparent about how we use AI in the product. The sixth is least privilege and minimum exposure by default. I think this one's pretty self-explanatory. And the last one, I think Leah talked about this really well, which is that security and usability are core requirements, right? A solution that's not usable but super, super secure, nobody's going to use it. People are going to work around it. And because we came up from consumer, it's a very natural thing for us. All right. So then now how do we look at AI now that that's established? There are two main sides of it. There's one which is incorporating AI into the products that we have as well. And that includes all of our products, Enterprise Password Manager, Trelica, Device Trust, and that's going to be an ongoing thing as we sort of incorporate like the value and the features that these solutions bring. The other side of it, which I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about today, is security for AI. So this is using 1Password products to ensure that agentic AI is securely deployed and managed in the enterprise. And this sort of ties to kind of two personas in the enterprise. There's the IT and security folks who have to actually manage and have visibility around agentic AI. as they access enterprise resources, for example. And then there are the like developers, right, that are using or that are developing AI apps and using AI IDEs and things like that. That we want to have a quick, like an easy way for them to incorporate 1Password in a similar way to how both Jason and Leah just talked about, for example, with SSH keys. We'll talk about it more. So double clicking on the security for AI. So the mental model that we have is basically there are two main types of agentic AI. One, and they're differentiated by how they interact with applications. So one is, you might call a browser use style agentic AI. So this is an agentic AI that drives a headless browser in order to interact with the world, right? And this browser could be on your laptop, or it could be remote in the cloud. And it's an LLM that's sort of driving this. The other type of agentic AI is a programmatic agentic AI. So this is the kind of agentic AI that would use APIs or use MCP to talk to different applications and do so sort of programmatically in that way. And these two agentic AIs access applications that some of them are behind SSO and some of them are not, right? Managed versus unmanaged. And the lines aren't like super thick between these. There's lots of overlap. In fact, OpenAI released a product called Agent, I think like maybe a month ago. It has both of these capabilities, right? It can do programmatic and it can do browser use. So there's lots of overlap, but for the purpose of solutions and how we address the problems and where the different problems are, this is a useful mental model that we find in terms of breaking this up. So, I mean, one obvious question to this is, well, why can't we just apply the solutions that we have for traditional applications, right? Like, do we need anything new for agentic AI? Is sort of a natural question. And the answer is, agentic AI is actually fundamentally different from traditional applications. And here are a few reasons why. So traditional applications are deterministic, right? I think we wrote them. We know exactly how they're going to behave. Agentic AI, on the other hand, is probabilistic. And you have this sort of misalignment problem over time, right? Where maybe for the first 10 minutes, the agentic AI is doing exactly what you intended it to do. And then minute 11 comes along, it goes off the rails. That can happen with agentic AI. With traditional applications, we typically refine granting it independent access. So, system-wide access to various tools and applications. With agentic AI, this isn't for all the cases, but hopefully it will be for most of the cases. It's typically human delegated. I authorize this agentic AI to do something. For example, in the MCP protocol, the OAuth side of the authorization is human delegated access. Right? I approve this thing to use credentials on my behalf, or have this access on my behalf. The other side of this is, if agentic AI does something sketchy, it's really hard to put one of those in jail, right? So it's probably good for agentic AI to be tied back to an actual person. The third is that we're typically granted traditional apps broad scoped access, even though we probably shouldn't have. But with agentic AI, the analogy that a colleague told me about was, it's like a toddler with a hammer that's running around. You really want to keep an eye on it, limit its, access. So fine-grained, time-bound, scoped access is really, really important with agentic AI. And then this is probably the punchline here, right? Traditional applications behave like applications. But agentic AIs kind of scramble this a little bit. They're actually kind of like users. And in fact, in a lot of areas, you kind of hear about agentic AI as becoming our future colleagues, right? Like there'll be a network operations agentic AI. There'll be a sales agentic AI, a programmer agentic AI, and these things will have to use workforce credentials to access things that we have access to as well. And so this really scrambles things in that sort of there's this kind of like hybrid user plus application behavior that agentic AIs. And so all of this is to say is that the traditional application method of, all right, any kind of credential access or credential management or secret access or anything like that is typically siloed, right? So you have your application team managing secrets for applications in, say, like a secrets manager, or a HashiCorp, AWS secrets manager, something like that, which is completely siloed from your workforce secrets and credential management, which would, say, be in a 1Password, for example. which is siloed from identity access and management, which would be like an Okta or Microsoft Entra. And agentic AI really scrambles these silos around because of these differences. And so authorizations need to be tightly managed and controlled and come from a single source of truth is part of the thesis about how this kind of changes things.
I have a
Sure.
question for
Yeah,
you,
please, yeah.
because I agree with this is how I would like it to be.
Okay.
But when I've looked at agentic AI, specifically with MCP, too often I'm seeing very coarse-grained OAuth scopes.
Yep.
I'm seeing it being very long-lived, right?
Yep.
Like I've said, the MCP can do it. Now you go forth and do it forever.
Yes.
Is that your experience too? All right, I just want to make sure, because I'm reading this, I'm like, I really wish it was fine-grained time scope, but I don't see that in the field.
Oh, this is pointing out the problems.
Okay. Yeah, okay. All right.
The challenges.
I'm with you, yes.
Exactly. Those are the desired.
I don't see that.
Desired outcome. No, absolutely. You know, MCP is one of these things. The first iteration of it actually didn't even have security as part of it.
Oh yeah.
And sort of security's been coming into it. And so I think even, you know, the folks that are working on it, and we're also involved in contributing to those standards as well, is you know, they understand that there's more work to be done there for sure. So yeah. All right. So double clicking one more time in terms of, okay, what is the state of the art in terms of these agentic AIs? What can we do today? So for programmatic AI, right, I think it's like you said, right? I mean, you can use long-lived API tokens, or you can use OAuth, right? Those are the sort of like two things that are available. And for browser use style agentic AI, the state of the art is the browser use basically stops whenever a credential is needed, right? It pauses and waits for a person to actually hover around their laptop and actually input those credentials. So this is true if you go to like an OpenAI operator, for example, or Claude computer use, or these different solutions, or browser base. All of them have this kind of situation. Or you have to pre-provide your credentials into yet another third party. So obviously that's not great, neither of those scenarios. And in addition to some of those challenges, you know, we have the challenge mentioned before about no single source of truth for secrets management across, you know, agentic AI and workforce. We have the challenge that we really shouldn't be relying on these agentic AIs to manage their own credentials. And actually, in an ideal world, we would fill credentials on behalf of the agentic AI and never actually give the credential directly to the agentic AI. But even if you have that, right, each time, you know, a credential is being used on behalf of an agentic AI, even the risk of leakage goes up, right? The risk that one day you're going to go to some, you know, chatbot and type, hey, what is, you know, Anand's password for this thing? And all of a sudden it's going to know, right? That increases each time it happens. So rotating these credentials, revoking these credentials, really important. And then the proliferation of out-of-date grants, right? This is, I mean, you know, I've connected my Slack app to like a lot of things and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think I've kept track of that. And I don't think there's a single place to keep track of that either. And so that's obviously even more important with agentic AI. And then, you know, audit logging, obviously the bar is much, much higher, as I mentioned before. And that has to be sort of improved for AI. So this would usually be the place where I talk about solutions. And this is where I'm going to be kind of unpopular here, I think, because we are going to be announcing, we are working on solving this problem. And we have a lot of announcements incoming, probably one in like literally a couple of weeks. We have more announcements to follow that as well. But you know, my corporate marketing department is eyeing me closely, so I'm not allowed to talk about it. But you know, stay tuned.
And I will say,
Yeah.
from one point of view, is that by outlining all the issues,
Yeah.
that's true. I mean, what Wolf is saying, like, I mean, you know, that is true, and that first you identify the problem.
Yeah.
So you have identified the problem correctly. So there you go.
Thank you. Exactly. But I would also like to talk about solutions, but but you know what I can talk about are solutions that we've developed over time, that we have even available today, and they'll tie back to stuff that Jason and Leah have talked about as well. That sort of talk about sort of how we're thinking about this. So the first one is actually, we have a product called Trelica. Jason alluded to it. It does SaaS or app governance and SaaS management. And so what we've actually built, as I mentioned before, we don't support like releasing raw credentials on top of MCP because it's just not the right design to do so. But we do support the protocol in general in terms of an LLM being able to efficiently utilize tools and resources and that kind of thing. So we actually built an MCP server on top of some of our Trelica APIs, and I'll just show you guys a quick, demo of it, sort of like a guided demo. But it's actually live, so you guys can do it as well. But basically, what this is showing here, so this is Claude, right? So it's an agentic AI in the cloud. And what you can do is you can connect it to our MCP server, right? So obviously, by default, you're not going to be able to ask it any questions about your enterprise data or anything like that. And so what you can do now is you can go over here and hit Manage Connectors, right? And you'd be adding a custom connector. And so you add this custom connector, and basically what you're seeing here is the remote MCP server that we have on top of the Trelica APIs. And so, you sort of add this in, you say, okay, add. And now you've enabled Claude to be able to answer a question like, could you look through all the contracts and find the ones that are up for renewal? Could you get the owner of the contract and draft an email and set up a meeting with them or something like that? Because now it has that capability that it learned through the MCP server that, oh yeah, I have these new capabilities and access to all these new tools and resources that you just connected it to. And then
at what point are we going from credential to OAuth token, right? Because 1Password is not a password wallet for MCP.
Yeah.
So I think I just missed 2 steps in your demo.
No, so this demo is more so this is the AI for security a little bit, right? In terms of, we have the Trelica software. Basically, you can access it via API today, right? But what we wanted to enable is an LLM to also be able to access that same data that's already available. So in this case, we're just using vanilla MCP, right, to support this use case. But you'll notice that it's not the most sensitive of data, right? We're not like putting raw credentials or anything like that, right? This is the ability to answer these kind of questions. And so that's what I'm demoing right now. Yeah. And so you hit go. And now it has the ability to sort of grab all this information and sort of, be able to do that and be able to draft an email and all the rest of it, right? So just an example of, I think this is all still in its infancy, right? I think probably most customers would be accessing our data by API, but we also want to be sort of supportive and forward-minded on this and enable our customers to also access it via LLM or via Agentic AI if they want to incorporate this kind of data into their processes. So
This
that's
is Marion.
Oh,
I
please.
have a quick question.
Yeah.
So using the connectors, are there any controls or safeguards in place for like overprivilege, pulling in data more than the user intended, like a privilege creep?
Yeah, so basically, so what we've done today is limit the set of APIs that this thing can actually access, right? It's read only, right? So we've really kind of locked it down in that regard. We do have guardrails around it as well, and it's on top of MCP. But I think there's probably a lot more to come in terms of as we expand the number of offerings that we offer through MCP and the number of APIs that we offer MCP going forward. And so that's still to come. But yeah, this has that.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, let's see why it's not full screen. Oh, there we go. It goes back to full screen. All right. So the next thing I wanted to talk. Oh,
1 second. I'm sorry. I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
So I don't know Trelica.
Yeah.
So did Trelica manage the authentication to whatever tool it saw on the back end?
Yeah.
So Claude didn't need the credential because it worked through Trelica. Trelica authorized.
Exactly. Okay. Trelica gets that data through like a different means or whatever through the agent. Actually, Jason's going to talk more about sort of the broader access trust gap and how Trelica fits in there as well. So that's how it gets its data. And then basically, the MCP connection is over the cloud, right? To connect to the remote MCP server. And MCP uses OAuth to basically grant access to the MCP client, right? And so that's how that connection works. All right, so the next thing that I want to talk about, I don't know if you guys all know, but you're all vibe coders. We're all vibe coders now, right? That's how we write code. And you know, in a lot of vibe coding, what it tends to happen is we hard code a lot of secrets, right? So we just either, you know, put them in our code. Worse yet, we put them in the chatbot and say, hey, here's my credential, you know, like just use it or whatever. You know, one level above that is maybe we make an environment file and put all our secrets in that, right? Which is better, at least it's in one place, but it's still sort of in plain text, right? But obviously there are better approaches to that. And so what I'm gonna show you guys and sort of just voice over is a demo actually that we showed how 1Password can make these flows much more secure when you're using an integrated development environment like Cursor or VS Code or something like that, right? And so let me do that. Oops. Okay. So what are we looking at here? Let's minimize this thing. Okay. Sorry. So a developer on the team basically built like a really simple app in Cursor that what it's doing is it's connecting to a database. That's it. And there are a bunch of credentials here, like the host, the port, right? The username, password to get into the database, just database credentials in general, right? And so, you know, you sort of see it there, right? That's kind of what's happening. And what he's going to do is he's going to try and, so those are configured to go get those things from an environment file or an environment variable file. And so he tries running it. It's not, it doesn't work because, what do you call it? There's no environment file yet. So what he does next is, you know, the first step of trying to make this a little bit more secure rather than putting those, you know, credentials directly in the code. He creates an environment file and puts those, what do you call it, credentials there. But obviously this is a plain text file, right? And so, you know, what do you call it? Obviously not the ideal solution. He runs it again, it works, right? And this time, because the environment file is now defined, right? So the next step is, and this is, what do you call it? This is something that you'll see, I'll be specific here. We're releasing this notion of environment file mounting within 1Password. We're releasing it as a public beta very shortly, right? And you'll be able to use it. This automation with Cursor is not available just yet. As in, like, you can do the environment stuff that you'll see in a sec, but what do you call it? Having this button down here, or being able to interact with a chatbot and just be like, hey, can you secure all of my credentials or whatever it is using 1Password? That's something that's TBD. I mean, it's something that some of our folks are sort of like at work on, but you know, not available yet. But in this demo, what you'll see is sort of a version of that, like of sort of like a aspirational thing of like, okay, you know, you have this environment file here, and he scrolls over this and says, no 1Password environments were found for this workspace. Click here to import, right? And you know, he sort of clicks it. It'll open up, you know, like the actual environment file that is to be imported. And what's going to happen is it's automatically going to pull up 1Password. And oh, sorry, yeah. And in 1Password, there's a developer section that everybody has access to, right? And basically, it will ask, hey, do you want to import this file, right? And so what it's going to do is, you know, you're going to sort of put in, you know, what you're going to name it, or create a new environment for this, right? And then just, I think he calls it something random here, my Cursor demo, import the project, right? And then let's see. And then that's the path that's going to get imported, and he does the import, right? And so what happens here now is that environment file, which basically had a bunch of key value pairs, right? Like the host, right? What's the value of that? What's the username value, the DB username, the DB password, and so on and so on. All that just gets automatically imported. You can actually edit and sort of like change values and stuff like that inside 1Password, as in, you know, just in the UI as well. But basically what's happening here, so I think he's just going to show that you can reveal the value and stuff like that, just like you can do in a regular password manager. But what's happening is the destination is actually that directory which stored the environment file. And what happens here is that now that file that's actually sitting on the local directory is just a FIFO file. So it's actually just connected back to the file that's mounted in 1Password. So you can't actually, like that file on disk or whatever it is actually linked now to the 1Password file. And so in that way, you're not going to like accidentally check it in to Git, right? And it's also now secure, right? And so you'll see sort of how you see it as or how it sort of manifests in that. Okay, so what he's going to do now is basically go back to the IDE and just run that script again. So over here, he's going to run this thing. Oops. Make sure it's playing. And then basically when he runs that script now, it's going to pop up a auth prompt for him because that file is now secure, right? As in it's inside the 1Password vault. So to be able to access it, you have to actually give it authorization. And you'll be able to control, okay, do I want to authorize this, for some time? Or, do I want the auth prompt every single time? Like, and things like that. But now you've gone from a case where you had a plain text file on your laptop or in your development environment to having it automatically in 1Password. So another example, I think very similar to the SSH key example of a very common use case for a developer that can easily sort of be able to make that far more secure in 1Password.
So I love that. I think that's an absolutely brilliant feature. I'm curious as to how that works for a developer that doesn't have 1Password, or when you move it into more of a production or test environment, an online environment rather than local in your laptop environment.
Right. So today this does only work for 1Password customers. So the answer would be you should get 1Password, and then you can have that feature. I
mean more specifically. So if you have a developer that, like, you have a new developer, he's not set up or whatever, and he goes and does a checkout. He's got this .env file that linked to a 1Password database, but he doesn't have that yet installed. So what's sort of that experience then?
Okay. So this presupposes that you do have 1Password on the laptop for it to like detect that you have 1Password and you're able to link it. For the production thing though that you were saying, we are sort of working on that as well. So we have two features today that can actually handle it. One is something called secret syncing, where 1Password is the source of truth. But let's say you're managing that secret in AWS Secrets Manager or something like that, right? We can actually sync it to AWS Secrets Manager. And that's something that we'll be sort of adding more to that, and that's one way. But we're actually looking into other ways where you can directly support 1Password on the other side, and use like a similar feature. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
We'll back up with that though, because that's interesting, right? Because from a security perspective, we want to have centralized governance of our secrets and be able to run reports and everything else. From a developer side, they don't want to change a thing. They're using AWS or they're using Azure. So is what you're saying is I could control the governance in 1Password and control the last mile in AWS or Azure in the vaults?
Exactly. You can do that. Exactly. And that's still sort of like the exact flow, the exact type of audit logging and stuff like that is still sort of an ongoing kind of conversation. But that's the idea, that we want to make sure that centralize the single source of truth, right? But then, the last mile, as you said, right? People may want like a different vault or something like that.
Right.
I mean, but for us, it's also, is that a trusted vault as well?
Yeah.
Like that we're syncing to,
Right.
So,
that's clever. Is it just AWS or is it Azure?
So today we support AWS.
Okay.
that's the first one we.
I snuck in Azure, and I want to double check that.
Exactly. Is that a feature request, Wolfgang? So awesome. So that's one of the other things that I wanted to show you guys. And then one last thing, and then I'll hand back to Jason, is we recently announced a partnership with Perplexity to be a launch partner with their browser. So they have an AI browser that they have. The scope of the partnership really is that we're the only password manager or browser extension that does password management that is launched with them. And the goal for us is for people that choose to use Perplexity, we want them to use it securely. We don't want them to memorize passwords or use Post-it notes, as Leah said, or anything like that. So our browser extension works. But there are a lot more announcements coming in terms of, okay, well, that's the vanilla browser extension that you can use when you're using Perplexity locally. But what does this look like for like a remote browser in the cloud that's driven by an AI, or an automated thing that you want running on your laptop? And there's more announcements to come, but of course they can.